Welcome to the Lax Lounge, powered by Lax Locks. We got Mike Caravana. We got a lacrosse legend with us today. Mike Caravana, thank you for joining us. He's if you're not familiar, Mike is a four-time All-American at Virginia, 28 years, head coach at Denison University, 18 NCAA tournament appearances, 11 Elite Eight appearances, three Final Four appearances, 15 NCAC conference championships, 320 wins, one of 21 college lacrosse coaches in history to reach 300 wins. I call him the Mike Tomlin of lacrosse, never had a losing season. And coached the U.S. men's national team from 2003 to 2006. And what most people don't know also was a soccer coach at Denison from 1990 to 1996. Welcome, Mike Caravana. Excited for you to join us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Aaron. It's always nice to be able to talk lacrosse, and to talk lacrosse to someone like yourself is always more enjoyable. I'm sure we'll have a good conversation.
Absolutely. And you've been retired since 2021. How's retirement treating you? Though it looks beautiful in Granville, Ohio there.
It's very pretty today. Ohio is one of those states where the weather can change very quickly, especially during the spring. But today is supposed to be 75, 80 degrees and sunny. We had a beautiful day like that yesterday, and the day before, not too bad. So we're glad to have that. Here in Columbus this weekend, actually, the Big Ten tournament is being held, even though Ohio State, unfortunately, is not in it. So it's nice that we have some good weather for those games coming up. Two of them tonight, the semifinals. I think the weather, again, is supposed to be in the low 70s and sunny on Saturday for the championship game, which is great.
And you're coaching, you're still helping out with, you started helping out with Granville High School lacrosse program. You guys had a game last night?
Yeah, we did. And I was helping out, just volunteering my time. I've worked with three or four of their better players who were seniors this year, the last couple of years, doing some private lessons and giving them some tidbits, watching some film, and just try to help them improve their lacrosse IQ and skills and stuff. And this year, my former longtime assistant, Adam Stewart, who lives here in Granville as well, took over the varsity program. Do you want to help out? I'm like, sure, I'll help out the best I can. But if I don't want to come to practice because I've got to play golf, which I might be able to do tomorrow with four or five of my former players from nearby Upper Arlington, or if I've got a family commitment or something I want to do, I want to be able to skip out. I don't want to, I want to make sure that you know that. So it's been very enjoyable, but I have to tell you, it's been a little bit different than I thought. I was reading a little bit of a book by David Brooks recently about Second Mountain, which is basically how you go through your life and how you get through things and how you can enjoy things. And then the second mountain part of it, basically, the first part of your life, you're doing things for yourself. You're setting goals for yourself and things you want to achieve, both educationally, professionally, family-wise, financially. But the second mountain, which is near, you're in your late 50s or early 50s and you're figuring out things. And so I've been really enjoying the lacrosse part of it since I've retired more, and either my camps, I'm doing some coaching consulting at times, which has been fun. But just seeing people, let's just say, enjoy the game more, but how the game itself, the game of lacrosse itself, can bring joy and happiness. And there's a difference in the book that David Brooks speaks about where happiness is something that you achieve, something that you judge, where joy is something that just happens, to make sense. It's bigger than you, it's with others. So let's say for all of us playing lacrosse, happiness is when we play well, but the joy is when our team beats a team that maybe we were supposed to lose to. And so the joy is spread out more, if it makes sense. And I've been finding more joy, very candidly, and as well as happiness for myself, watching our JV kids actually watching them catch and throw with more consistency and coming to practice, looking to learn. And when I'm diagramming things on the board, as simple as, look, now this is how you cut through. So if a player runs at you, this is how you cut through to create space. Executing those things, showing the guys on the board and having them go out and do it on the field, and then seeing that happen in the scrimmages or JV games. And really that's been very joyful for me in many cases, where I thought coming from where I did, you kind enough to mention all these accolades. I played on a wonderful high school team. I played for three National Hall of Fame coaches in my high school coaching career. I had a lot of things set up for success for myself. But with these guys, it's been more the idea of, like I said, is just watching them play lacrosse and getting something out of it and seeing if they focus and they pay attention, they can improve. And I always think that, again, going back to my high school days, and fortunately for Jim Adams and Bruce Arena and Tom Duquette, a lot of coaches that affected me as a player, they were always transferring successes that we attained on the field to how the focus, the work ethic, the dedication, the commitment to your teammates, those were characteristics that you can carry over into your life. And so for these guys coaching high school now and ninth and 10th graders, seeing them find some success where 3 months ago they were doubtful that they would be like, they could be a reasonable lacrosse player. And so to see them find that success to me has been very joyful and really enjoy it very much. And the same thing with our camps. And we see kids come in on the first day and they're not as consistent with their stick work or their lacrosse IQ. And then we watch them the last couple of sessions where they play and they seem to put it all together. But yet in discussing with other coaches that are older like me, the challenge we have with lacrosse right now is that the young men who participate who get better because they play on these teams or come to camp, the challenge is what do they do after that? You know what I mean? Because now they've got a taste of the success of doing it. And we try to inspire and spur them on. And, okay, now that you've mastered your basic skills, let's do this a little bit better. Let's do this more often. Let's go out and practice maybe a little bit more now, your position skills you need and things you need to do there. And watch some games that are on YouTube now. So all the games are on YouTube, even if you don't get ESPN or CBS Sports, whatever, or Flow Sports. You can watch so many lacrosse games now that it used to be. So you watch players play your position, maybe be able to pick up a thing or two each game. So that's the next phase of hopefully for joy for me will be if I can connect with some of these young players throughout the summer and then the fall in preparation for next season to say, hey, what are you doing? What can you do? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These are things you take steps to improve and hopefully you'll be doing some of that sometimes,
And I had the privilege of being a student of the game at the Lacrosse Academy that you and Doug Bartlett started. Had the privilege of being there and working with you and coaching there. And you're really no stranger to developing talent in these kids at a very young age. You're just really getting back to that and in other ways. And it's really good to hear that you're finding that joy again and that passion. That's awesome. Because that's what we really loved so much about the Lacrosse Academy was how much you really loved the game. You really got that from you. And that was pretty cool. And a lot of people didn't know that you coached soccer at Denison when you got there. I know your kids love soccer.
I also coached hockey too. So that was really a completely different experience. I think that the thing that I think it really enhanced my ability to become a good coach. Not that I am close to the level of Coach Tierney, but Coach Tierney, when he went to Johns Hopkins, had the same situation. He was the head men's soccer coach for 4 or 5 years and the assistant varsity lacrosse coach for the lacrosse team at Johns Hopkins. And Billy and I both had no soccer background. But I think anytime you coach people that age, if you're wise, which I think that both of us were trying to be, we were looking at, okay, so if we're going to coach this, what can we take out of it? What can we learn? You have an opportunity to deal with other young men and you start figuring out what works and what doesn't work in terms of your forms of communication, forms of inspiration, forms of building a positive relationship. How do you develop leaders per se? All these things were opportunities that soccer afforded me twice a year now, not only with just lacrosse, but now I had soccer. So I had 2 teams to manage, which was challenging. But yet, if you look at it now, instead of, let's say, coaching 40 lacrosse players and 25 soccer players, I've got 65 players I'm coaching. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of players to learn from if you're willing to take that attitude. And so for me, it really helped me become a better lacrosse coach, being a soccer coach. And I think lacrosse helped me become a better soccer coach because it helped me have a greater repertoire of things to be able to hopefully move my players forward, both on the field and off the field.
And you mentioned leadership. I really think that's why you had so much success as a coach at Denison was, knowing a lot of the players that you coached at Denison, they were always great individuals. They were always great guys and they were always great leaders. And I think that's really a testament to your success. And you really put a focus on developing leaders. Would you say that was probably why you guys were so successful there? You had great leaders?
I think if you have players who are good guys, I think at first and foremost, but there's another side of that too, as well. But if you're trying to create a culture that is supportive of all the levels of play and all the levels of age, I think that's what benefits you the most. What I mean by that is that I don't think you win as many games as I've won or other successful coaches won unless you mesh the team together. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you've got to create an environment where the seniors engage and incorporate the freshmen, and the freshmen are willing to take, you know, what I mean, some of the nuances and advice that the seniors are building. Then you have a continuity, the top and the bottom, that just keeps going back and forth and filtering through. So the hardest thing to do in sports is be consistent, I think, both in your attitude, in your play, in your desire to improve. All those things are very challenging. But yet, like I said, I said, try to incorporate was we would expect more out of our seniors and juniors than we would our younger players. We would share that with them. But at the same time, we were going to coach them to where we think they could be. And I played for high school coaches like that. I played for college coaches. So it wasn't hard for me to see, I think, what the right way was to build a team and build a culture. I only lost 5 games in high school in a 3-year span. I only lost maybe 20 games in college over a 4-year span against the best teams in the country. How do you win? How do you win consistently? Starts with those relationships and the culture of respect from the bottom up, but also from the top down, understanding and having empathy for now that you're a senior in college. Don't you remember when you were a freshman? Don't you remember some of the challenges that you faced? Don't you remember after getting a bad grade after a test that you studied for? Not necessarily not one you didn't, many of us didn't, but ones that you did. So how do you respond to them? How do you communicate with them to be better? And I think that, again, those are lessons that I think are crucial, fundamental foundation things for you to build a program per se. Anybody can have a good team. A good team could be just a collection of players, but to have a really good program, that consistency over time, that's what really coaches are looking for. And again, spending time as a soccer coach, developing that program gave me insight into maybe how to tweak and turn my lacrosse program, and how to build that as a lacrosse program could help me tweak and turn how to build my soccer team. So,
And speaking of you mentioned challenges. I think it's impressive how you were really able to adapt over those 28 years at Denison, and even taking that was like a 4-year stint at Woodbury, adapting to all the changes that you faced on Division III and just in lacrosse as a whole. What were some of the biggest challenges you think you faced as a lacrosse coach at Denison?
at Denison, it was always a situation where we had a little bit of a tougher academic standard than maybe some other schools that we might compete with. But that was always the biggest challenge for us was really getting players to come to Ohio itself. Ohio is not Jamaica or North Carolina. It's not a sexy, attractive place. Got to get kids out here to come and visit. Now, Denison is one of the prettiest schools in the country. So when people come, I used to give you an analogy. It's like a blind date. You go on a blind date and you're a little frustrated, or how's this going to turn out? You have very low expectations. And all of a sudden you meet that person. Wow, there's a connection here. This works for me. You know what I mean? And I could see us going out on another date per se. So I always view it like, come on out. Look, take a visit. I know it's like a blind date. Like I said, you're not sure, but I'm telling you, if you come out and visit, you'll like what you hear. It might end up being like a blind date, the person that you marry, but it could be a very positive experience for you. And I think that's the key thing that was always the hardest thing to overcome. But as we found success nationally, it was easier for me to get more and more people to take that leap of faith to come out and take a look. And if we had enough people come out and take a leap of faith, then we would be able to get good enough players. You don't win 300 games without having really good players. We were talking about this off the air. As a college coach, the first thing I worked for Don Strasio as my first coach, and for 2 years. And Don was an excellent leader, excellent mentor, excellent person to me. But he clearly said to me, Mike, recruiting has got to be the most important thing that you do, because if we have good players, it can overcome bad coaching. You know what I mean? No matter if coach poorly. So you got to have good players. So we've always had excellent players here. But I do take credit. And one of the things that, again, going back to my high school and college days is that there was a great emphasis on having these good players in both our program in high school and in college. But the emphasis was on player development, and not just technically, but on mentally. And to learn, yes, you can be bigger, stronger, faster, and have skills, but what was your lacrosse IQ? Your lacrosse IQ had to improve. so that then you would see why you needed these skills or this acumen to be good at your position. And then if we put that collectively together with a lot of good players, we're going to have a very good team. And I was always taught the idea that you should coach a team that has to be beaten by somebody else.
Yeah.
Never want to be a team that beats itself. You want to limit those as much as you possibly can. And if teams can beat you, great. It's like last night we were talking about scooping in our recent game, and I was telling the guys, look, you have one chance to scoop the ball. You need to scoop it the first time. If the other team checks you, that's a good play by them. You can't control that, but we can't be missing scoops. We scoop it the first time, there's an 80% chance we're going to come out of that with the ball. But if we miss the scoop the first time, there's no chance. Right? Make the other team beat you is how I was taught to play, so that you had to then use both your IQ and your athleticism and skills to be able to really control the game as much as you can, so that they were forced to match you and achieve better than you do that day to beat you.
And I'm sure one of the easiest ways to recruit Denison was probably the game against Ohio Wesleyan every year, or games if you met them in the NCAC tournament too. What were some of your favorite moments from that rivalry?
Well, we had
I got to see a lot of those games growing up.
well, there are very highs and very lows. So we talked about happiness and joy, and we talked about gloom and doom. And I often tell first-time lacrosse coaches, you're not a lacrosse coach or a coach of any sport, head coach, until you lose a game. When you lose a game, now you're really the coach, because you're staying up at night, you're puzzled, you're not convinced, you're thinking through all the things that could have affected the game that either you could have done or addressed earlier. So there were many losses to them oftentimes. The best thing that happened to me, probably looking back at the thing, was the first year we played them, we lost them like 22-4. And I had never lost a game by more than 4 goals in my life. And so it was very humbling, which I knew they were very good, and we were still on building back up after I replaced Coach Thompson. And it really was inspiring to me to be able to go, okay, we got to catch these guys. We got to catch these guys. So as much as I had a desire to beat them, they were the standard. And they were the ones you wanted to catch. And it really inspired me to continue to be a better coach, to keep looking at my team, to keep looking at other people's teams and figure out what are they doing? Why are they doing this so well? Can I incorporate this into our team? And how do I speak to my players to get them to do a little bit more because of this? And we ended up getting closer to them. And then really the last 15 years that I was there, we probably were the better team over time than they were. But the highlight was when I first came back from Woodbury, we had a good team and here at Denison, and they were seniors that I had recruited but not coached. So this was the first year that I had coached them. And it was exciting to be back coaching players that I had identified to be good players. And we played at Ohio Wesleyan. It was a big game, as it usually is, always for out here, one of the big, if not the biggest game out here. And we got ahead of them 10-0 in the first quarter. And I didn't know what to do. We had never been ahead of them 10-0. We never thought we would be. And I remember I broke a clipboard like in the second half because we started throwing the ball away or something like that. And the players are looking around like, look, we have a standard. Unfortunately, you guys set the highest standard you could in the first quarter. The standard does not go down in the third quarter because we're up by 7 goals here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've been lost being ahead by 7 goals. And so the intensity level of it was really probably a good and bad. I probably lost a couple of years of my life on it, but at the same time, I would have traded the opportunity to play such a good team and a good program like they were. It raised the bar. It was no different than when I was at Virginia playing Johns Hopkins or Maryland or North Carolina at the time. It raises your bar. The better teams, if you're a competitor, ask more of you. And they ask more of it throughout the game. They ask it for 4 quarters. And so you want to, as an athlete and as a competitor, you want those challenges. Do you want them every game? I don't know. It's always a big question. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want enough of them, certainly, to be able to challenge yourself to see how far you've come and at what level can you find what game itself can put you at your highest level of performance.
So what Denison teams have you coached that gave you the most joy, that were the most fun to coach throughout the course of the season?
You find out often, to me, it's my best teams needed me the least because they had generally upper class guys that were very good, that understood what it takes to do it, and they had confidence. The teams that I think give you the most joy, I think many coaches will tell you, were maybe not your most successful teams, but the ones who you feel like you help get the most out of, to make sense. Then like they can play their best lacrosse given injuries or they weren't maybe as talented or whatever it may be, or whatever. Honestly, like I said, my third year here, we had a good team and we had beaten a couple of teams, and that was a watershed moment because the guys started believing in me. Like I knew what I was doing because we had taken these steps to win, and that put us in position to beat Ohio Wesleyan twice the following year, which was a big difference. 4 years ago, we lost 22-5, and we win the game on 8 goals 4 years later. So that was a group. But even actually, my son Nicholas's senior year, where he got a chance to play on a team, and being a coach's son is very challenging without any question. But he had earned an opportunity to play, and his team was good. We had 3 injuries in the first 3 games that cost us 3 starters, and yet we played an Ohio Wesleyan team who was top 5 in the country. And we lost both those games by a goal, one in the conference, the season game, and in the conference tournament game in overtime. And that team really came together because it really could have fallen apart, if it made sense. They see that these 3 players were all-American caliber players. Like any team loses 3 players, are all-American caliber players. You're going to reevaluate what you do. But I think we coached them well enough. They galvanized. They played really well. So that was like one of my more, again, going back to joy and happiness, like joyful experiences for them. Because they found success, even though they lost to Ohio Wesleyan, who's their big rival, and they don't want to lose to them. But you're walking off the field going, hey, we're just as good as these guys. And we're down 3 or 4 players here, which is a big difference in lacrosse. And so that was one team that comes to mind. And then when you look back at it, you're always excited about your top teams. But I think those are the 2 teams that come to mind. The one that kind of helped us get on the map and the one that helped us stay on the map. Because we weren't as good, but we were a top 15 team Nick's senior year because these guys played great and they galvanized and they listened to what we were saying and they worked hard. And because we were so competitive with the top teams, we got the respect of the other programs. And then the 2 years following that, we had 2 of our better seasons we've ever had. Knowing that, because those underclassmen could see what the upperclassmen did and needed to do to put themselves in the best position to play their best. And they completely bought into that. That's when we had James Mager and Blair Farrenholt and Liam Rooney and Ben Duhouse. We had great players, but again, as underclassmen, they could see what was needed to be. And that's the culture that you're hoping to perpetuate. When you have a difficult season, you're hoping that the players that are returning have taken something from it to be a benefit for them in the future. So.
And that's great. You talked about that season. I think Nick's senior year, your son's senior year, I think he was even a little banged up too, but I think he played through it. I think he got hurt his junior year.
Got hurt his actually freshman and sophomore year. And his junior year, he was actually the first year back after a knee situation both. But like I said, he persevered through it. And that was exactly what was the characteristic of the team a little bit. Like this was their senior year. This was their turn. It's the first time he played extensively. He played some extra man the year before and done fine. I was like, okay, so how are we going to play? How are we going to go about it? How is his team going to be reflected upon in the annals of Denison Lacrosse? Denison Lacrosse was way successful before I got there. And so we speak about that all the time. When you play Ohio Wesleyan, I'm getting emails and texts from people all over the world. The boy ready this week, we're thinking about him. It's bigger than you. And how many times do you play in games that are bigger than you? So the opportunity to play in the Ohio Wesleyan game, I'm sure the same thing to the Ohio Wesleyan players and coaches. It's a wonderful opportunity to play in something that's bigger than you. It's not just a big game. It's a game. It's the game per se.
Yeah.
And so that's a nice thing. And those guys just wanted to play as well as they could. And I think they did in both games. Sure.
Absolutely. And those are the games we always look forward to. When I was in Stevenson, like Salisbury, that was, that was the game. And of course you guys too. What were some of the toughest teams outside of Ohio Wesleyan over your years at Denison that you faced, that you had to play against?
Early on, the tougher teams were always Gettysburg and Roanoke. They were very strong. Gettysburg was probably the more consistent throughout the years, the 25 years I coached or so. They were always very good teams. And then we started playing different teams periodically because, again, it was hard to get teams on the schedule. Very few teams were willing to come out to play us. Then we started playing Stevenson near the end as well because Paul was willing to come out and play us because he also wanted games and good games. And so they were always very strong too as well. There was one game Stevenson had. It's not the year I think they won the championship. It was with Jimmy Daly and all those guys. And they were terrific. And Kaz and defensively, they were excellent. And they had come out to play us here. and we lost. I might have been like 17-6 or something like that. It's very rare for us to lose like that at home. And after the game, I'm in my office, and our college president, Dale Noble, knocked on the door. And I was shocked afterwards. He says, Michael, said, I just want to come on by and check in on you. He said, I've never seen your team lose like this. Are you okay with it? I said, yes. I said, they're the best team in the country. They played an A+ game. I said, we played B+. We weren't bad. I said, they were just terrific. I said, I can live with it. What am I going to do? I said, this is what you schedule. And so he was like, okay, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. And I said, yeah, I'm okay. No, going to happen when you play really good teams. Sometimes if you get there a game, you're going to be in trouble. And then it's what you do when you play when you put yourself in the forum. Sometimes you're not going to be the victor. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of those games, Denison, we always look forward to at Stevenson, was playing you guys, whether it was at Denison or you guys coming out to Baltimore. But that was always a good time. There were a lot of clipboards thrown. There were a lot of water bottles thrown in the locker room on our side. It was
I think
always
Paul,
a
I think
heated game.
Paul, when I first started coaching, I recruited Paul to come to Virginia when he ended up going to Loyola. And so we go way, I was only 23 years old. He's 18. So don't get me wrong. And so we go way back, and there's a lot of mutual respect. And I think in his case is, look, like these guys are going to play hard. They're pretty good. They're going to be coached. They're going to play hard. You know what I mean? I know you guys think you're good, Stevenson, but I'm telling you, you don't play your A game. They're going to bite you in the butt. And for us, it was always a little bit of a reach. Like I said, okay, you know what I mean? Let's go challenge ourselves to these guys. And we can't back down. I mean, I'm a Long Island kid. When you step on the field and you play with a certain attitude and you play with a confidence and a conviction that you're going to find a way in that day, even though you might be the underdog. And my team had a certain characteristics of itself. And those two things would certainly match up to an intense game. But on that day, we were not as good. And that's okay. Like I said, it happens sometimes.
It happens. And we talked about, you even said you've been giving some advice to coaches. What do you consider to be the most crucial element, or some of the most crucial elements in building a successful program?
I think how should I say it? The consistency, the word consistency, when I read about successful people, when I read about successful companies, when I read about consistent teams, and I read about successful leaders that are in charge of those groups, the word consistency is constant. And what I mean, and okay, so that's a broader 3,000 feet. But now what do you need to be consistent? Messaging. I think people don't understand that messaging needs to be consistently, because that messaging basically gets ingrained in people's heads. It's what they learn. And also, I think the consistency of the coaches. What is your level of accountability? Where are you going to hold people accountable, starting with yourself, working through your staff, and then to your players? Now, I'm an education major. Less and less coaches now are really education majors, which is basically what they teach in ed school is a methodology and a pedagogical way of how people learn, per se. And just because you're a good player doesn't mean you're going to be a good teacher, right? And again, because you're going to be a good student doesn't mean you're going to teach that subject very well. So to me, it's always been, okay, how do we build this up? And how do we have our consistency? Where do I think our accountability should be, starting with myself? Where do I think my accountability should be for my assistant coaches? Where does each player, like each student in the class, where is their accountability? Most classes have a bell curve, right? You got, let's say you got 5 A's, 5 B's, and 5 C's. Okay. I cannot coach the A player the same way I coach a C player. I can't coach a B player the same as an A player. What I want to do is to try to take the C player as a student as well, looking at academically, and make them a C+, B- student. If I can make the B player a B+, A-. If I can make the A player an A+, A's player, everybody's improved some. And that'll make a big difference. So how do I do that then? I have to have messaging that's consistent across the board, but yet consistent for each of those 3 groups. I've got to have an accountability and a communication style that can be shared with each of those players, so that they know where they're at and what I think they need to be able to do that to reach the next step. And then how do I help them do that? Just identifying what players need to do is one form of teaching, but to be a real effective teacher or player development in this case, now what can I do? What can my staff do to help you take those steps you need? Okay. And those are forms of communication, not only just forms on the field of working on skills and, and watching film, but also forms of communication to keep one inspired when someone hits a plateau. Everybody hits plateaus.
Mhm.
So how do you keep going when you reach that plateau to keep rising above? So it's those kind of things that we talk about all the time. So basically what I'm trying to work with a lot of coaches with is how consistent are you with yourself every week? How consistent are you with your staff? How are consistent with you with all of your players each week? Okay. Then it goes down to each day. Okay. Then it goes down to each day at the end of practice, looking at that. How was our practice today? If it was good, why was it good? Why was it, if it was not good, why wasn't it good? You know what I mean? Was it communication? Was it attitude? Was this or that? But really constantly streamlining and evaluating it and reflecting upon it so that if you're asking your students or players to be better every day, starts with me. I have to be better every day. I have to be more effective in my leadership ability every day for every player that's out there. That's the charge I've been given. And that consistency, I think, will allow your team to progress as fast as you want. No, I don't know that. And some teams faster than others, right? But I think most of us will say as teachers, we want the students on the test day to do pretty well. As coaches, we want the end of the season play to be improved than it was at the beginning of the season. And those are the things that, again, that you take from athletics and you can transfer over to anything that you're doing, your relationships in life, your work, your being a parent, whatever it may be. Hey, I understand that I might not be the best parent to my 16-year-old, but when he's 26, if he looks back and goes, Mom and Dad did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And that's what you want. You want him to be able to look back and know there was passion, there was care, there was accountability, there was love, there was dedication to trying to make you the best person you can be. You might not have made every decision properly, but they knew you cared. And then can you communicate that in a challenging yet positive way? Like people say, you can't, and you can't. Like players today can't be coached the way I was coached. Mm-hmm. A little bit more direct. It was a little bit more tougher love. But challenge
bombs.
I mean, balance people today, but you need to finish it with, look, you're a better player than that. Don't be giving me this, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's different than going, what the F are you doing? Okay. It's completely different things. You know what I mean? This is what you need to do, and you're a better player than that. Teammates are counting on you. Don't let them down. Make sure you give 110% effort. So you can coach people hard, but your messaging, going back to that, has to be consistent with a positive challenge, if that makes sense on it. I think that's where those are the little cues and little things that, again, being a teacher and having my sister be a very celebrated teacher herself, who's 13 years older than me, many years, setting the bar for me. No, like she was an excellent teacher. She got awards. I'm like, all right, I'm a competitive kid. I don't want my sister to be better than me in anything because she'll remind me of that. We're from Long Island. So I'm going to try to be the best coach that I could be. But the attitude in listening to her was like, again, she was always willing to learn. She was always willing to improve and gain a greater repertoire of things to be an effective leader, an effective teacher. That's what really stuck with me the most. And that was one of the things I think that helped me continue to be successful as my career went on. I knew at 60, my communication skills with an 18-year-old were not going to be as easy. So as it might have been when I was 27. So I need to go. I used to say this all the time to coaches, the older you get, the more times you got to walk to the back of the bus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when I find out, the more times you got to go into their world.
Yeah.
They're not going to come into your world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
After the games, I used to always go in the locker room. And some of the other coaches at Denison said, why do you go in the locker room? I said, because I want to see how they're celebrating, how they're commiserating, what's going on, what do they have in their locker, what do they don't have in their locker, you know what I mean? Who they're communicating with, who they're not. I need to go into their world more because I'm not as close as I was to them. What music they listen to.
Yeah.
Even make fun of me or not. They know I'm there. They know I'm like, I don't know. I said, I'm like, I forget, there was a funny thing I used to say, like, I'm trying to think of something, but it was like Drake. Well, let's just use Drake. And who's obviously in a very celebrated on, all right, is this Drake or is this somebody else? And they would look at me and go, come on, coach, how do you know? And I'm like, I don't know. I said, it could be Ruby for all I know. What the hell do I know? I said, are you going to help me learn or not? You know what I mean? And they knew right away because I was trying to learn or trying to, it was a new perspective. And that's what you really wanted. You want to be able, they needed to know that I was willing to do what I needed to do to build a relationship with them that was respectful and collaborative. That makes sense. In a collaborative way. especially at the college level, you need more collaboration because you have a more mature player. At the high school level, you need to find a joint spot, if that makes sense. That works, but because in college you have an older person, if you need to collaborate with them more. Okay, how are we going to do this together? If that makes sense. Where in high school, you got to keep setting the course, if that makes sense, but being aware of how fast that person is running or moving. In college, they're like, no, let's collaborate and say, this is how we're going to train and this is how we're going to improve and let's work together. Those are just key things, I think, looking back at it, they're really not complex. The challenge is to do them consistently, which a lot of people.
Consistency is key. And that's what we're seeing from some of the better teams in Division I now that kind of got off to a slow start. We're starting to see the
I mean, like right now, if I give you on a scale of 1 to 10, one of the most frustrating coaches, who do you think would be?
Well, you Pacific coaches?
Yeah, let's say the high level Division I coach. What coach you think would be the most frustrated with his team right now?
Oh, yeah, Lars Tiffany.
Maybe. No, I would even say
you said be the most frustrated with their team?
Yes. Lacks a level of consistency.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
And that's all I'm saying. Now, it doesn't mean they're not winning the championship. It doesn't mean John is excellent and his coaches are excellent. They easily can figure this thing out if you follow me. Again, laugh it away with their players and go, hey, got the ACC tournament, we got the NCAA tournament. We got to win 5 games and we're going to be in the promised land. They can do that without any question, right?
Yeah.
But how do they play versus Penn at home? And how do they play versus North Carolina like that away? I'm sure John is going pulling a hair out of his head, right?
Yeah.
But how do we play so well versus Virginia and play so poorly versus North Carolina?
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is that what John has always been able to do better than most teams is have inconsistency early in their season, but yet as the middle of the season and the end of the season goes on, they play very well. Okay. Most consistent program the last 15 years is Notre Dame by far.
Yeah.
Always good. Always good. You know what I mean? They've could have won 4 more championships very easily. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But Kevin is my former teammate at Virginia. He's an excellent coach. He's an excellent communicator, always willing to improve. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's 65 years old. Okay. He might have his best team ever at 65. That team is his best.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I would agree.
What I'm getting at, he's willing, again, to keep learning and keep getting better to make sure that his team is connected. And what I'm getting at is those traits are crucial to high-level coaches. But he finds success, like I used to judge it, with a certain level of play. This team standard is here, going back to what was my most joyful team being one of my son's Knicks, was because they found a new standard and they were consistently good at it. If it made sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So teams had to beat them. And so this is what you're trying to develop. And that standard, like I said, holding that standard consistently. Again, starting with yourself every day, do the team what you're really after. Because that's why do we play player A over player B? Because generally they're more consistent than player B. Why do we give a raise to someone or a promotion? Because generally I can count on them to get things done that need to be done. It doesn't mean the other people are more talented, but they're less consistent.
Exactly. Yeah.
Consistency really is, I would say, consistency is quality. This is, again, my messaging. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So player will pick up a ground ball and throw the ball 20 yards, but it'll be over the player's head and I'll go, hey, consistency is quality, big boy. Okay. You got it? So one good is good. Okay. You know what I mean? One throwback is bad. Now we're back to 0. So when do we even want to play the sport that we want to get to 0 at? Very rare. Right? I said, these are kind of things that you hopefully can, but it starts with yourself every day, and then working its way down through your staff, your practices, individual players, the training room communication, my players. Are we on the same page? If we're not, always other things that are spreading us, pulling us apart. Could be team dynamics, could be something on campus per se.
Yeah.
Something visual in someone's life. They might got bad news about a grandparent or an uncle or sibling. That can pull you apart from being collaborative with that person. And just being conscious of that is just crucial, I think. It doesn't mean you're going to catch it all, but if you're consistent in that, it's not going to get to this point. You might not find it right away, but you're never going to lose touch. And that gives you a chance to come back faster. So,
That's great. Consistency across the board, not just on the field. I think you just mentioned even the training room, making sure you're on the same page. I think that's huge right there. I think that's where I'm seeing a number of teams. I don't think they have consistency across the board with as far as their trainers, medical staff, what they're working on. Because been seeing some banged up guys that aren't producing as much and are playing that probably shouldn't be playing. So that's a good point you brought up. Who knows? Maybe Duke's dealing with that right now with the Brendan O'Neill injury. Maybe that's why he's off and on. But that you really brought up a good point there.
well, and if I may add, Aaron, what I've learned through all my coaching is you build these relationships and you take that accountability and that standard and you hold people to it not because when you win, it's when things don't go bad. There's always this big family analogy, right? Everybody says our team is a family. And I tell people, it's easy to be a family member when all the cars work and all the bathrooms work and mom and dad are at home. Okay. But if the bathrooms don't work and you have to share them now, and someone's car doesn't work and you have to split the car, and mom goes out of town to take care of a grandparent and we're all going to chip in to, you know what I mean, to do various things around the house, what is your attitude? Right.
Yeah.
So it's easy to be a family member when you win. A family is doing all these things we talked about. This accountability, this communication, this collaboration is all important after you lose.
Yeah.
Then when things get difficult, that's when the family has to step up in a joint manner, you know what I mean? To fill the points that are lost or address the challenges that we face. That's important. And I think that's, again, one of the things where, like people are saying to me, Virginia's lost 3 games in a row. It very rarely happens. All right, yeah, okay. They probably played teams 1, 2, and 3 in the country. Okay. So now if they would have lost to someone that they're better than, that might be a situation. But if I'm in that locker room now, I can't wait to play Notre Dame again. Because we can, we're not getting killed by 10 goals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We can correct all those losses quickly. But I have full confidence in Lars. And if you spoke with Lars about his team building and his, his relationship with his players and you see it, they're not in the locker room now pulling themselves apart. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're in the locker room pulling themselves together.
Yeah.
And the same thing I feel with John's team at Duke after the Carolina game. Not the team for Syracuse to play on Friday in general. We'll see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're in Syracuse. They get a chance to come back after that Carolina game. That's what I mean about that level of consistency. It's not when you win, it's when you lose.
Yeah.
How does the group come? Do they get better and better? Or do they pull themselves apart?
Exactly. And I wasn't going to let you get away without talking about Virginia. And like you said, Lars has been really consistent over his tenure at Virginia. He's been there, 8 years now or something like that. Time is really flying by. And, I was looking at the numbers before the losing streak happened, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, it was Duke. And I'm like, man, Lars has not lost back-to-back games since 2017.
Long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time. To lose 3 in a row only makes me, they got to pull through. Do you think they're going to come out? I honestly think they're going to beat Notre Dame. I think they're going to beat Notre Dame tomorrow. I haven't even looked at the line for that yet, but I love Virginia in that game because just like you said, I think they're going to pull together. Do you know what?
They have every opportunity to do that. I will be surprised if they don't play better than they did on last Saturday. And I think last Saturday, their fourth quarter performance was not to their standard, going back to what we talked about before. So I think it's going to be a great game. They could play Notre Dame in the semifinals or the quarterfinals of the NCAA tournament 3 weeks from now, 2 weeks from now. Well, let's put it this way. When you play at North Carolina, when you play at Virginia, you play at Duke right now, you play at Notre Dame, you expect to win every game you play. It's part of going there. And so but again, when you have teams that, I'm not going to say to you that Virginia hasn't reached its potential because they lost these 3 games. Their staff and their leaders, I'm convinced, will try to learn from each of those and get better for it. There's only been 2 teams in the last 25 years that went a season undefeated. And you know what I mean? And Maryland was one a couple years ago. It's hard to do. So how do you respond to losses? And so again, going back to my point is, and I think that I'm not just sure Notre Dame wants to play Virginia again, right?
Absolutely not.
Syracuse wants to play Duke again. You know what I mean? Again, watching, let's just say, I'm not so sure Hopkins wants to play Maryland again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why those teams are good, because they have a level. Just because you lost doesn't mean you lost your confidence.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to actually gain a greater, maybe a greater sense of conviction of what you need to do and have a greater focus. So I just don't know. Like I said, but I just think, to me right now, if I had to pick the second team in the NCAA tournament, Syracuse is the second best resume.
Yeah.
Options. You get them head to head. Okay. So Virginia's got a loss to Notre Dame, got a loss to Syracuse, you got a loss to Hopkins, and they got a loss to Duke. Okay. So they lost to teams 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
All right. Can we beat 1, 2, 4? Damn straight we can. Okay.
Mhm.
It wasn't every season that Stevenson beat Salisbury. And
Yeah.
so what to do? Doesn't mean you can't beat them. And as long as the games are competitive and you know that, one thing if you come off the field and get slumped. But again, I want to mention it again, coming off a loss, how that responds. And the other part of it is, like I said, is that having players who go there with an expectation of success, consistent. Again, going back to the word consistent. You know what I mean? That's why they're there.
And I think Virginia should feel very confident going into this game, having watched the game.
They were ahead.
They were ahead, and they're turning the ball over. They had 28 turnovers in that game. And to lose to the number one team in the country, probably one of the best teams we've seen in Division I in a long time, to lose by only 2 goals after turning the ball over 28 times, we know that's not Cavalier lacrosse, right? That's not Wahoo lacrosse. Like, you're not turning the ball over almost 30 times. So they turn the ball even half that time, they probably win the game. They turn the ball over 14 times, they probably win. I think they got a very promising situation coming up tomorrow. But some of the stuff we're talking about is, I think, is really good for a lot of these young coaches to hear coming in. There's going to be some turnover here in Division One. One of the biggest step downs and most surprising was Mike Morgan at Merrimack. Are you familiar with what happened there?
I'm familiar with the situation. Yes. Unfortunately, it's never an easy situation to deal with. And in college sports, unfortunately today, if you're not in basketball and football, it's the term student athlete, and the whole idea and the philosophy of college sports is prominent still. If you are a basketball and football, it's a little bit more. It's certainly a term that way, not only in playing the players, but just the idea that we have sentiment that these are money-making sports, and we have to treat our employees like they're money-making sports. And I just think that Mike got stuck in a tough situation. You know what I mean? That we had a player say something that was derogatory. It was directed. He might have been held accountable for it. He might not have liked the way it was dispersed. And probably in many cases, it sounds like maybe he and the administration weren't on the same page about how things were handled. And again, no different than any other relationship. The athletic director that hired him might not be the same person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The student life might not be the same person at 15 years. So I think that there's a respect that I have for all parties per se. I understand the school standpoint and wanting to do what they want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And having their coach completely cooperate. And I understand the coach who's recruited this kid, who speaks about, has an opportunity to build people up and do things. And who knows? I don't know. But obviously it seems like there might not have been an ideologically, you know what I mean, agreement about how best to handle this. But I think, so it's better sometimes to step away. That's all. And to try to find a better, maybe a more mutual situation. And that's going to happen in many cases. Happens in relationships all the time.
And switching gears a little bit, you coached probably one of my favorite U.S. teams of all time, U.S. men's national teams. Pretty cool. You coached the Powell brothers, Kyle Harrison, Joe Walters, Jay Jalbert, Nicky Polanco was on that team, Gagliardi, Trevor Tierney. Insane roster. You lost and you beat Canada. I think you beat Canada by 1 goal in the third play.
First time.
And then dropped one in the championship there. But you think your philosophy changes when coaching such skilled players like that?
The thing that most people are not aware of, and U.S. Lacrosse has certainly gotten better at that the 20 years we've had it, is that we only had 3 practices before we started playing the games. Your team cohesion and things like that were really challenging for me, coming from, again, an environment where your messaging, consistently, the word consistently is hard to be able to build in to people because you don't have that time to do it. So the guys did terrifically. No, I think it's just a matter of organizing your players. It really was just saying, look, this is the offensive set we want to play out of. This is the defensive set we want to play out of. You know what I mean? And then go from there and really just getting them organized and figuring out, okay, what's the best grouping of attackmen to play? What's the best grouping of midfielders to play, defensemen? And then went out there and playing. The challenge in the U.S. in the World Games, which came to hurt us, was that it was a committee that decided who the players were back then. Now it's basically the coaching staff. That changed. It went from the committee to the coaching staff after we lost. It was one of the suggestions that we had made as a staff. When 30 people were trying to decide with 23 players on the team, it's hard to build consensus, right? Anyway. But the rules in international lacrosse is that there's not any limits to your pocket depth. Okay.
Yeah.
And you can't play over aggressively. Okay. So let's think about the Canadians and give them credit. They had an excellent faceoff guy, and we did not have a so-called faceoff player. This is what we missed. Paul Cantabene should have been on our team facing off, but he wasn't. So we didn't win faceoffs in the championship game. And they had Gary Gate playing and John Grant playing, who had these pockets that were so deep, we could never dislodge the ball.
Yeah.
And because the aggressiveness is the game is curtailed, to try to dislodge the ball, you've got to play aggressively. And if you foul, and still now today, you don't want to foul the Canadians because to them, the goal is like an ocean. So when they got ahead, we started winning faceoffs and we couldn't get, and there's no time limit. There's no shot clock.
Yeah.
They're getting the ball and they're running off 3 minutes at a time. And if you come out and be aggressive with them, you foul them and then they get a chance to go extra man and it's just like to catch 22. And so the U.S. team has done a much better job of kind of figuring out how to manage that, looking at the game itself per se, and what pieces we need to do that given the rules. And people are just not aware of the rules as much as they can be. And in some ways, the Canadians, like last year when they played, many more of them are playing the American lacrosse game. But last time they played, I'm not so sure that served them very well, if you don't mind me asking you. You know what I mean? They might have been better off holding the ball last time instead of trying to win a 13-12 game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is 9-8 game or something like that. You know what I mean? Because the rules favor them.
What changes do you want to see in the international game?
I think the changes need to be the depth of pocket needs to be consistent with the American game, I think. I think that's really the main thing. And I think a shot clock of some sort, even if it's not the, whatever it may be, the ML, the PLL or the college level, let's say it's a minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's still some type of shot clock would be advantageous.
No, we'd love to see that shot clock. And that goes back to what the Rabel brothers have created with the PLO. That brand of lacrosse is very exciting. Having that shot clock, a shorter field, I think it attracts more fans, which we're always looking for growth of the game, right? And to see the international game, like you said, adopt the shot clock, I think it'd be healthy for the sport of lacrosse on a global level. So do you think outside of Virginia, like we talked about, do you think anybody else can beat Notre Dame this season?
Oh, sure. I think Duke can beat Notre Dame. I think Hopkins can on a given day, but I think Duke and Virginia probably have the greater opportunity to beat them. So again, lacrosse is very interesting. Like I said to you before, I think my friend Kevin Bargan could have had 4 or 5 championships, but play one game. This is why, like in basketball and hockey and even in football, it's one game. It's like my Giants beating the Patriots in the Super Bowl, one game. I'm not so sure that player is going to catch the ball on his helmet except one time. Happened to be in that game. Is the Buffalo kicker going to miss 2 kicks? You know what I mean? One game, sure. So I think that's what makes even the NCAA basketball tournament so exciting. You really think that Virginia and Purdue would have lost to those teams if they would have played them 7 times? They would have probably won 6 of the 7. That one game they lost. And so it really makes it a tournament. So I think that there are teams that could beat Notre Dame, but not many. Put it that way.
And outside of the top 5, do you have any sleepers coming into the tournament? Who do you think could possibly make a run, make an upset, run deep in the tournament?
Depends on what is a run to the Final Four or is a run to the finals is a run to, again, we've got 16 teams. So you start out with 16, you get down to 8 right away. I think the teams that have shown they can do it are Cornell and Delaware, Towson and teams like that. They can win a playoff game or 2, but get to the semifinals, it's tough. The team that's really pretty strong, but it's had some recent injuries that most people aren't aware of, is Yale.
Yeah.
But Yale's two top faceoff men were very good, and that's how they beat Denver, because Denver has an excellent faceoff guy. And Yale's missing 3 starters besides this. Okay.
Oof.
So they're the one team that I look at, and Cornell's game with Notre Dame gives them confidence to be able to play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think teams can get to the Final Four, but I don't know, you know what I mean? If they can go, those teams can go further than that. If that makes sense. So.
Yeah, essentially, we love to see a team like how Penn State did it last year, and they possibly they got robbed. They probably should have been. They probably should have been in the title game last year.
Well,
but
now with the replay, they probably would have been.
they probably would with the replay now. Yeah, and looking at teams, you mentioned Cornell. I think at Lacrosse, it's one of our favorite. That's one of our favorite sleepers. Denver as well. I think they have a great coach at Denver. I think he's built the program for a while, and I think the players have really,
Very good job in transition. Denver can, I think, but I don't know if they have enough offense, very candidly. I think in that, what scares you about Cornell and Yale is they can score. They have Brandau and they have Kirst. They've got 2 excellent players, right? No matter what anybody says, when you have a great player like that, no different than the Caravana and for Duke O'Neill and for Virginia Schellenberger, it gives everybody confidence, because when you have that All-American player, he's going to be consistent and be something we can count on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That takes a lot of pressure off the rest of the other guys to be able to play their game the best they can. And that's why I like Yale and Cornell as the 2 teams. And Delaware has a couple of very good players that could shoot very well.
Yes, they do.
Owen, they can win the first round game like they did last year, and then play Cornell in a tough game about 2 years ago. So they're dangerous. It again depends who they play.
So today we got the conference tournaments getting underway today for most of these conferences. And we got pretty good matchups today. Hopkins, Michigan. You think Michigan stands a chance coming in today?
I think Michigan stands a chance because of their face-off guy.
Yeah.
I think their face-offs can be very strong. Michigan has some very good athletes on the wings, and so they can hold their own with that, I think, as well. So I think face-offs will be a crucial thing, because I think Michigan's going to need more possessions. But Hopkins just found some inconsistency in their offense the last couple of weeks. Hopkins had a tough time scoring versus Ohio State. The following week, Hopkins had a tough time scoring versus Maryland. Their offense is good, and I think it's certainly improved. But there's a situation there where I'm not so sure like they score that easily all the time. Michigan can keep them under 9 goals, they're going to chips. And if they win the faceoff, they certainly will enhance their chances of holding them under 9 goals and having the ball. Lacrosse is a possession-oriented game in general. If you have the ball more and you're playing more offense, 2 things happen. Number one, the other team can't score, and you're either going to score or not score or draw a foul. Like my high school coach would say, 2 of the 3 things when we have the ball, they can't score and we can draw a foul. Good, because anybody can score an extra man. Anybody. You know what I mean? When you have an extra guy, a couple of passes, someone's going to get their hands free to shoot it. Like I said, you don't want to play Delaware on man down.
Yeah.
They got guys who could, and so it's one of those kind of things. So I think it could be a competitive game, but I think it'll center around if Michigan can win 65% of the faceoffs.
Exactly. They got to take a page out of Maryland's book. Maryland played Hopkins really well, and I think if they possess the ball like Maryland did, I agree with you. I think they can. I think they can really keep it closer and possibly even win against Hopkins. We've got Hopkins covering the 3.5 spread today, but it's not one of our favorite picks of the day, but we'll see. And I think we got a lot of anxious attackmen at Hopkins this week. Hopefully they can come through and score more goals than they did against Maryland. But like you said, it's possession. That's what we're looking at in the tournament is possession. Ground balls now are more critical than ever. Who do you think is probably one of the best teams on the ground you've seen as far as scooping it once? We talked about it earlier. Scooping the ground ball one time, that's one thing we look at especially from a poll perspective. Who can get the ball off the ground the quickest? Which team really stands out to you as far as that?
I think the 2 best teams defensively off the ground are Virginia and Notre Dame. I think in general, they're very strong. Notre Dame first pass off the ground from an IQ standpoint is very high. I think people discredit that. Even Liam Mentiman, who might not be and probably is not as adept as Matt Nunes is getting the ball out fast and forward. But Liam's really improved his decision-making on making the simple play. And though Notre Dame picks up the ball clean and they generally make the simple play. You know what I mean? And that allows them to use their athletes to clear the ball and then play. And again, they have the ball and they keep the ball. The rules favor you. You know what I mean? Just because you scoop it the first time, that's a good high school level. The next decision is the college level. That makes that, and it doesn't matter what division you're at. You make the right decision to throw it to the right person, and then can you throw the ball, it's catchable ball to that player, if that makes sense. So if I'm open and I'm holding my stick in my left, but you throw it to my right, and there's a guy near me, it might not be as easy for me to gather myself, to catch it, run away, and then me make the next good throw. All those things are very important. And Notre Dame, I think, is the most consistent in doing it.
Yeah, I would think I would agree with you. Another team too, I would consider a sleeper, and that's been playing really consistently. Taylor Ray's team, St. Joseph's, and as far as getting the ball off the ground, and like you said, that second aspect of it, and your polls making a decision, a good decision. I think St. Joseph's has been doing really
Yeah.
well.
The challenge that St. Joe's have, these other teams have, is not that they're not good. Going back to Delaware and there's all these other CAA teams and MAC teams, it's just that the level of athlete that they're going to start playing when they play the ACC and Big Ten schools is a little bit faster, a little bit quicker, and so that they're on top of you quicker, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like the closeout rate is quicker. It's like being a quarterback in college compared to throwing in pros. Like all of a sudden now, the cornerbacks and safeties are that much quicker and they anticipate that much more. So it doesn't mean they're not good at it, but we haven't seen them be that good lately against that level of competition. So doesn't mean they're not good at it. Don't get me wrong. You know what I mean? But it's like the level of competition they're playing every day is not the ACC. So the margin of error of why maybe Virginia lost to Syracuse or Virginia lost to Notre Dame could be just what we talked about. Picking up a ball the first time, but then making a poor throw, not even a poor decision, a poor throw to a player that's the right player. And yet they lose the ball, and they pick it up, and then they make a first time scoop. They make a good decision. They get the ball to Pat Kavanaugh. All of a sudden, oh boy, we got trouble. You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah.
You can't get the ball to Connor Schellenberg. That's a problem. We can't get the ball to our attack. That's a problem. And please don't tell me they're not good, St. Joe's. That's not, or I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when they play at a higher level, they're going to have to keep that performance up. And it's hard to judge that. That's all I'm saying. And that speaks to any team playing maybe one level below the highest level. But it doesn't mean they're not good. You haven't seen that consistently yet. If that makes sense. So
Yeah, and that's and we talked about it off air a little bit, is the mini matchups too. It's tough for some of these schools like we were just talking about to guard a midfielder, a big athletic midfielder like Griffin Schutz, which brings me to my next point. Actually, I got a kind of a funny story about Griffin. Actually, our Fogo for the club team I play on here in Houston used to coach Griffin Schutz. And he said that when he coached him, I won't throw out his name because Griffin's a big boy, but he said that he's coaching face-offs back in, I think it was middle school or high school. He told Griffin, he said, "Man, you're absolutely terrible. You might need to consider just playing football." So it's pretty amazing to see Griffin Schutz kind of become a big part of UVA's offense. Do you think they're really going to need him to step up to really make a run and beat Notre Dame? It seemed like in the last game against Notre Dame, they gave him the ball at the end of the game. It seems like Lars is really looking for him to step up and make an impact.
I think I would anticipate that he's going to play an important role. I anticipate, having been and watched them practice periodically, that he'll be looking forward to that. And I anticipate again that he will do better than he did the last time he played in that situation. Virginia needs some other guys to step up besides him. And so they need Millen to step up. They need Boyden to step up. They need 2 goals from their second midfield any way they can, per se. You know what I mean? Maybe cutting, maybe dodging, maybe shooting, maybe unsettled, whoever knows, things like that. Virginia needs more people to be able to find the help in the scoring department they can. And lots of times, like I was mentioning earlier, you expect Griffin and Connor to play. It's the other guys that really separate you compared to the game. When you're playing teams that are like you all the time, it's generally, you know what I mean? Not the player that makes the most plays. It's all the other guys. So if you would have said to Virginia and most people in the country, Syracuse is going to beat Virginia with Joey, what's his name, Bellina having
We
zero
don't.
points. Okay. No one would have said that's possible, correct? No. They would have said, okay, he didn't have a point, and they scored 17 goals. That's a lot of goals. Okay. So just saying, if you would have said to everybody last weekend that Carolina was going to be ahead of North Carolina, people would have said, okay, Carolina would have been ahead of Duke. People would have said, sure. It was one point they were like 9 goals ahead of them.
Yeah.
No one would have taken that. You know what I mean? Everybody said, sure. 1 or 2 goals, 2 or 3 goals, sure. Carolina wins, they're going to win by 1 or 2. You know what I mean? If Duke wins, they'll win by 6 or 7. You never know. But Carolina's Owen Duffy didn't play. So all their players rose up and played great, which is what they needed to happen for them to beat a Duke team where O'Neal was okay for him. You know what I mean? They by maybe 2-1 or something like that. But those things happen. That's why I said one game, everybody can play and go. But I think that Virginia needs the other players around Griffin and Connor to step up and have good games, which they can, and hopefully they will. Being an alum, I want them to do the best they can.
Right.
I tell people I coached the red and white team a long time, but I bleed blue and orange. Okay. I had my wife due to Virginia. I have my life due to Virginia. The opportunity to go to school there and play there has been life-changing for me. And it's like I tell people, I'll wear my red and white colors every time I can. But if you take the blood out of my skin, it's going to be blue and orange. So it's way good.
And Charlottesville's a beautiful place too. I mean,
I went to a British school. I went to a great program. I met a pretty wife. I married. I got engaged to my wife when she was a junior in college. My friend's like, why are you getting engaged to her? I'm like, look, I'm not screwing this one up. Okay. I've been pretty good so far. I'm not letting this one float away from me. Give her an opportunity to go somewhere else. I'm taking care of this right away. I'm pretty good about that. I know my limitations. Okay. I'm not fit. I'm doing all right.
It helps that you're an All-American too. That probably helps.
I don't know about that. Not with my wife's actually. When we'd come home from one of the things I've always enjoyed with her is that we have I had 3 boys and they come to the games and I'd say, Ashton, what do you think of the game? And she'd be like, I didn't really watch much of it and I really don't have much to say. And I would be very happy about that because I didn't need to come home and get critiqued. And my wife would say, you should have thrown the ball to him on extra man. I didn't need that. And I have some colleagues of mine whose wives are like really into it. And they come home and they would give her like, why did you do this? And I'm like, I don't need that. When I come home, I don't need any more self-reflection than what's going on in myself. I don't.
That's incredible.
Perfect to me.
I got to ask you about Duke and Syracuse. We had Cuse in the regular season. Of course, they pretty much dominated Duke in that one in the Dome. Duke is again favored. Duke is again favored tomorrow by, I think, 1.5 goals. What's your outlook on that? Or you think you see Brennan O'Neal step up? Or
I think playing in the Dome is an advantage for Syracuse. And I say people don't understand why. It's not when they're scoring goals. It's when they're not scoring goals and they're down. And they get the momentum from the crowd once they score to start working towards catching up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They get, used to be obviously, right, Syracuse Orange and the juice. That's where they get the juice from. The crowd provides them with the emotional when they're down and they need to score and they start scoring. You feel it, even through the television. Okay, let's go here. You know what I mean? They don't have that where they're at now in Charlotte. And so I think that helps Duke in many cases. And again, I'm only going to say this because I like to think I'm a high level competitor. If you're Duke, you want to play Syracuse. If you're Virginia, you want to play Notre Dame right now. That makes sense.
Yeah.
If I was Duke, especially after I played the way I did versus Carolina, who do I want to play against? I want to play Syracuse. We can right the ship right away. If we beat these guys by 3 to 5 goals, you know what I mean? That first Syracuse game is gone away. It's all done. The Carolina game is in the past, right? I'm not going to stay. I'm not very good at picking spreads, but I like the underdogs in all rematches 90% of the time if it's the right culture. And I think those teams have very strong cultures because they have excellent staffs, not just the head coach. They've got a staff because I think they're really good programs. The head coach operates with his staff. So it's not one person coaching them. It's 5 players coaching. When you have a team of 45, you need all those staff members to be on the same page. And I think both those staffs and all the team staffs, all of them, that ACC and the Big Ten and Delaware, we talked about St. Joe's. I think that's what Taylor Ray and Danny Shamati have done the best. the last 4 or 5 years,
Mhm.
is that staffs are very good and they're excellent leaders of their staffs, that they're getting a consistently high performance from their team all the time. And
Yeah.
I think, so having now, so like I said, it's a tough game for St. Joe's to play Richmond if they play them again, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what I mean? So if you're a High Point, you're playing Richmond, who lost to them a couple of weeks ago. I'm not
That's a
Richmond. I'm not going to play High Point if I don't have to. So anyway, I look at it that way. I look at the staff and the quality of the staff and the quality of the culture and go,
yeah.
this is what makes the game 50-50. Look that way. That's why I'm not good at picking. But I would pick all the underdogs to win, but I wouldn't be able to tell you the score.
Yeah. Yeah. And Syracuse being the underdog again, it's very enticing to take them, but Duke is just, if again, playing in Charlotte, I think that's a benefit to them. And I really love their Fogo. He's
The other thing that
very
I
tough.
might
Kid.
say to you that could be very interesting for Syracuse is going to be, it could be very hot today. I mean,
Yeah.
and it could be very hot on Sunday, where Duke and Virginia used to playing in the heat. Notre Dame and Syracuse are not. But in my opinion, Syracuse and Notre Dame have the best second midfielders of anybody in the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's where they might
They
not
got
be.
depth.
They might not play as much to that. So
Yeah. And then again, that's one of the important things you got to look at too in the playoffs is depth. Usually the deeper teams make the run. That's what happened with Penn State last year. Penn State had shooters on their second midfield line. And I think that helped them out a lot, coming through there and getting to the Final Four. But all good points there. And we always like to close the podcast here with a little advice for some of these recruits. We got a lot of young recruits that follow us and that like to watch what we have going on. And coming towards the end of the high school season, these kids need to finish strong. I would say, what are the most important qualities for a student athlete to be successful on the field? What would you say?
I think it starts with your focus, because I think every day if you bring a focus to try to improve,
Mhm.
so focus isn't just to play. The focus is to try to improve each day. That's what's going to also be a trait that try to cultivate in college. That makes sense. You know what I mean? People often say, and I say this to people all the time, the fun in high school is to play. The fun in college is the competition. And people look, and their first thought is not the teams you're going to play. It's you competing versus the game. That's where you're going to get better. That makes sense. The
Yeah.
competition is going to test your level of skill versus the game. So the fun is in the competition versus the game, not your opponent. There's a difference. And I think if a young player in high school can go and try to get better each day, focusing on what I need to do to get better each day, even if it's not on the practice plan. Do I stay 5 or 10 minutes after the work on this? You'll see a progression, and that'll help them be ready so that when they get to college and the next level, they understand, okay, it's still beating the game. I'm still doing what I did in high school. Now the competition level is higher. It should be higher because you're a better player. So those are just things that maybe that can help.
Thanks so much, Mike. Thanks, Coach.
Thank you for helping me. I hope it was helpful. It's always great to talk with you. If I've been able to help somebody else or get them to think about some things, that's great. Lacrosse has been so meaningful and so important to me. And I just hope everybody plays the game with a smile. And like I said, and gets a joy from not necessarily just happiness, but a joy from playing the game and playing with others the best we can. And I go back to all the time about the joy of playing the game goes back to the Native Americans. And I tell people all the time, when the Chiefs were deciding what Indians to choose to represent their tribe, which is how the game was played really for land territories instead of fighting, he didn't choose everybody. If you choose to pick up a lacrosse stick, you're a little special. And so with that, enjoy that opportunity of playing the game with others and enjoying that joy that you can feel from the success of others that maybe you helped.
That's Coach Caravana there, folks. Thank you so much.
Everybody, great summer.
Best of luck to you this season, the rest of the season with the high school program.
Thank you. We'll see what we can do. Hopefully we can keep improving.